So thank you, Lisa, I think has done that. Thank you. So I think I'll just begin with the karakia, and we can maybe just do a quick welcome. Usually at our CITR scholars, we kind of do like to just say hello and learn kind of who's in our community. So tu taua mai I runga, tu taua mai I raro, tu taua mai I roto, tu taua mai I waho, kia toai, te mori tu, te mori ora, ki te katoa, homie, huye, taikie. So atamarie, everybody, and ko Jen Koziel McLean, toko ingoa. And I'm the director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Trauma Research. I think sometimes it's easier if I'll just go down my list and ask people to give a quick who they are and maybe if they have a relationship to the field that we're working on. So I'll pass the racco now. We have a couple Chris's, I think. Does one of the Chris's, I see two Chris's. So have a go. How about Chris?
Okay. Kia ora koutou katoa. So I'm Chris and I'm sitting here just outside of Raglan, and I have joined the VIP team. So work alongside these lovely women and gentlemen and have been doing that since May. Lovely to see you.
Kia ora, Chris. And how about Anja?
Hi, everybody. I'm Anya. So
Anya?
I recently started as a research officer in the biostatistics clinic.
Oh.
So I'm just using all the opportunities that I can get to listen to people talk about their research, just to get an idea what people are doing, and especially listening to the research methodology. I don't know if Ayesha is going to talk about that, but it's just interesting for me to listen to everybody's research. Thank you.
Welcome, Anya. Lovely to meet you. And how about the other Chris? Okay, we'll maybe catch them later. Chin.
Hello, everyone. So I just had to plug my phone in. Hi, I'm Chen, and I am a research officer in CITR, and I'm currently working on a project on family violence in integrated health care. Lovely meeting you.
Good. Thank you, Chin. Jason.
Good morning. I just recently started AET as a postdoc research fellow at the TBR network, and yeah, I thought I'd come in and just say hello and learn and listen, really. Thank you.
Great. Welcome, Jason. Gwen.
So I'm Gwen Earlham, and I teach in the interprofessional school the research paper. And I'm just interested by the topic. I think that this is something that we all need to learn about. And so I just am here just to listen and learn.
Kia ora, Gwen. Claire Gear.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Claire. I'm a research fellow in the CITR and also have the privilege of working alongside Ayesha in the CITR Scholars Group and a couple of other people in the Zoom call today. Kia ora.
Great. And Julie.
Good morning, Julie Ballack from Clinical Sciences, and yeah, the topic sounded really interesting, so looking forward to hearing what Ayesha has to say.
Great, Julie. Great to have you here. Kay.
Kia ora, everybody. Yeah, my name's Kay Hammond. I teach on the research paper with Gwen, and I'm interested in the topic and learning what's going on and what people are interested in.
Very good. May. Apologies for mispronunciations. May Show. There. You're muted. Could you unmute, please? Oops. I think oh, there you are.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Science, yeah. Laboratory microbiology.
Oh.
Technician, yeah. Senior technician.
Excellent. Well, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicola.
Kia ora, I'm Nicolae Hilton. I'm from Good Shepherd, New Zealand, and very lucky to be Ayesha's partner on this project.
Excellent. Happy to have you here with us. Thank you. Pam?
Atamarie, I am Pam. Oops, sorry, I'll turn my screen on. I work for the School of Sport and Recreation, and literally I am interested in the topic. Thank you.
Excellent. Good to have you here. Rebecca.
Atamarie, I'm Rebecca Jardin, a Kiwi working in Melbourne, and today I'm at my other role at Austin Health. Hi.
Great. Great to have you here. Rumen.
My name is Rumen Rachev. I'm a research assistant with the Health Futures. And yeah, I'm interested in the topic, and thank you for having me.
Great. Sani.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sani. I'm a law student at AUT. I'm also a research assistant to Dr. Juliet Nanai. I'm also involved with writing cultural reports for the courts, as well as lay advocates for young children. And I don't know if Ayesha remember me. She was my lecturer last year for my business paper, financial decision making. Good to see you, Ayesha.
Excellent. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Rumen.
I already introduced myself. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Shamala. You're on mute, Shamala.
Kia ora, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you very much, Jen, for sending the link. I'm a senior research fellow here at Otago University, and I work in the area of Pacific Health at the Center for Pacific Health. And I'm also working with Jane and her team on the iSafe My Plan dissemination project. So really good to, I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation, Ayesha, on financial.
Great, Shamala. Te Wai.
Kia ora, I'm Te Wai. I am a research officer under CITR for the iSafe project, and I am also a PhD candidate under Topua Wauda, looking at Māori rangatahi engagement in health services. And I've met Ayesha through CITR Scholars. Thank you.
Kia ora, Te Wai. And Jenny? Not sure if I'm pronouncing that or if it's just, is there Jananai? Who haven't I introduced? If you'd please, oh, hello.
Hi, Jay. Yeah, sorry. It's me, Juliet Nanai. I'm the Equity Academic Pacifica for
lovely.
Faculty of Health. Yes, and thank you, Mr. Sauni, for introducing our research team. So the topic is important and probably of interest to sustainable development, how and where our Pacifica people may come in. So it's a topic of interest. Looking forward to the presentation. Thank you, Jane.
Good to have you here. And who else have I missed? Is that it? Great. Well, it just gives me great pleasure to introduce Ayesha. Thank you so much. Ayesha was awarded her PhD from Queensland University of Technology, and she joined AUT's finance department in our School of Business. And her expertise in women's finances and financial abuse and economic harm is certainly aligned with the work stream that we've been engaged with since 2001 here at AUT in the Center for Interdisciplinary Trauma Research. And we've just so enjoyed having Ayesha as part of our team. And it's great to see everybody here and carry on the interdisciplinary nature of our Mahi, because we all are in this together and we all have a role to play. So just a big welcome, Ayesha. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us today. So over to Ayesha.
Kia ora, everyone, and thank you, Jane. So I'm going to be co-presenting this morning with Nicola from Good Shepherd, who you were introduced to just a moment ago. But firstly, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming along today, and I'm just going to now go through that awkward few seconds where we wait for the screen share to work. I am sharing my entire screen, so unfortunately I'm not going to be able to see any of you, and I am going to, hopefully that's working. Nicola, tell me if it's working.
We can see your full notes slide of the PowerPoint in the middle, and then we can see your screen. We're perfect.
We're good?
Yes.
We can see the full PowerPoint. Excellent. I'm just going to flick back because I didn't start at the beginning. Why would I? That would be too logical. So apologies for the fact that I can't see anyone, and I'm going to rely on Nicola to interrupt me whenever she would like.
Wish me luck, everyone.
What we're going to try and do, because it is such a diverse and wonderful group this morning, is I'm basically going to give you a snapshot of our project, and there will, of course, because of time, be parts that I don't cover. So we welcome all of your feedback and your questions as we go through. I don't have access to the chat, so I'm relying on Nicola to kind of address anything as it comes up. But basically, this is work funded through AUT Health Futures. So Nicola and I were fortunate to pitch our project to the AUT Health Futures Fund, and we received a development grant. So we weren't fully funded, but we received enough, and it turns out to be sort of, you know, a decent little chunk of money to actually get this off the ground. And since we've begun this project, it's really sort of taken on a life of its own, and we'll speak to that a little bit. Another note is that I'm very grateful to you all being here. This wasn't supposed to be the first presentation of this work, but it has turned out, through the extended lockdown in Auckland, it has turned out to be the first presentation. So you're getting the sneak peek of what we're talking about today. Basically, the big problem that we're talking about is intimate partner violence. And I'm not going to spend too much time sort of describing this, but basically our problem that we're addressing through this project is hopefully going to be economic harm, financial abuse, and economic abuse. So this is how money is weaponized in an intimate partner setting to cause harm. And it exists on a spectrum, and we'll speak to that. But because the audience today is very familiar with the extent of this issue, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the problem, particularly because our project as it stands very much sits within the prevention space. So even though we've got this really big meaty issue that causes significant social and economic harm through society, the project itself is much more of a preventative measure, and so we're really hoping to kind of be in that preventative space and make sure that you know, we're able to help everyone have healthier financial relationships, which is our goal. For those of you who haven't heard of economic harm or financial abuse, we use a few different names. Basically, this is the use of money to control an intimate partner in this setting. So this is manipulation. It might be just flat out restriction, you know, controlling access to money or the means to obtain financial resources. So sabotaging employment, preventing employment. There's also it's all the different ways that money can be used to control another human. So one of the things when Nicola and I sat down to sort of talk about, we have a wider research agenda that we'll speak to in a moment, but one of the things that we really started talking in and around is the awareness issue that economic abuse and economic harm and financial abuse has. So even though we, you know, physical and sexual violence, the It's Not Okay campaign, you know, broadly the average person knows that these things are wrong and they're deplorable. When it comes to our money, though, it is not so much clear cut. And this is similar to other non-physical methods of violence and non-physical coercive control. But sorry, I've just had someone walk into the room, which is always
welcome to 2021.
Yeah, exactly. I'm amazed that I don't have a kid kind of like leaping in at the minute, but and no pets, thankfully. But yeah, what I would say is this awareness issue around money is because we don't tend to talk about money. You know, and it's tied up in a whole range of societal and cultural norms. So money is a taboo topic. So if money is a taboo topic, then how families and particularly romantic partners deal with money is very much kept behind closed doors. It's not something that we tend to talk about, and it's not something that we're necessarily going out of our way to model to our children.
So
and that's, yep. Go, Nicola.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just going to say, so from our perspective, that's where some really harmful behaviour hides. We've created an environment where harmful behaviour can hide under this umbrella of we don't really talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. And so the way that we sort of thought through this problem is, well, what can we do to bring the harmful behaviour out in the open? And one of the ways that we can do that is upskill everyone, you know, make it everyone's problem and make people the solution, regardless of whether or not they know of anyone who is experiencing economic harm.
And the thing that is really interesting, and what has happened to both of us, is that as soon as we have started talking about what it is and what it looks like, we have people saying to us, oh, right, so that's what happened to my friend's sister, or that's what happened to this person I know. So very much people, as soon as you explain it, they can identify with those behaviours.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other issues that we have when we start talking about economic harm as well is this idea of elder abuse, which is also a significant issue, but is quite different in terms of, I suppose, the dynamic and the situation that people face. So even though the consequences might look similar, when we talk about financial abuse, one of the things that people automatically do is they go straight to elder abuse, but that's not what we're talking about. Although, I mean, ideally, if we can erode the money taboo for New Zealanders, then we're helping to sort of, you know, bring all money behaviours into the open. But our project is firmly set in this romantic partners space at the moment. So we decided that we would build a toolkit for New Zealanders to help them build healthy financial relationships and to help them have these conversations around money. So there's some generalizations along gendered lines on the slide, and clearly is not going to fit everyone. It is a generalization, but in general, we know that women tend to lack confidence when it comes to money matters. And regardless of how financially capable they are, they're more likely to defer to a predominantly male partner to show love and trust. Men, on the flip side, tend to be overconfident, irrespective of their financial capability. And they also face a real societal pressure and historical pressure to be the breadwinners for their families. So we have, we do see a gender dynamic, of course, when it comes to how we deal with money. And this is, you know, through households, but also through society as well, with the gender pay gap. That lack of confidence for women also turns the gender pay gap into a gender investing gap. And of course, women tend to live longer than men, and so they actually need more money toward the back half of their life than men do. So this is sort of seen in a whole range of ways, but for women in particular, this consequence, I suppose you could say, of not talking about money has really adverse consequences. So when we talk about romantic partners, of course, we've got two individuals, although predominantly two individuals, maybe more, who knows. We have two individuals who are coming together and combining their financial lives. Now, the issue here is that we might have differing financial personalities. We also haven't been raised to discuss money. And there's so many different triggers for wanting to have a money conversation. And some of them tend to be big decisions, changing circumstances. But if we don't know how to have that conversation, and we don't necessarily have the confidence to address these issues in a useful and constructive way, then it can cause a lot of conflict. And we know that money talk and money conversations, particularly money arguments, tend to recur, they last longer, and they are less likely to be resolved. Okay, so fights about money tend to be much angrier. Okay, and we know when we're talking about an abusive set of circumstances and an abusive dynamic, that, you know, money is both a barrier to ending a relationship and, you know, seeking safety, but it is also, you know, used as a method of control. So the idea here is, how can we help everyone have better money conversations so that if someone is facing economic harm, economic abuse, then they feel more comfortable around what is normal and what is abusive, and really talking about that spectrum. Nicola, have I forgotten anything?
No.
Nope. Okay, I'm gonna just crack on. So what does this toolkit look like? Well, I've got it open for you to have a little look. So you can see it's still a work in progress. Hopefully you can all see that. Nicola, are we on the toolkit?
Yeah, yes, we are. Sorry, we are on the toolkit. And the idea of it, as it stands at the moment, so there's a whole nother development piece to go on now, but the way that we've set it up for the focus groups was to have it in two parts. One is preparing for the conversation. So those are the topics like what you bring to a relationship. We all bring something. We all bring baggage or values or stories to our relationship about money, and then some things around the gender that we talked about, power and privilege. So that the idea is that you start thinking about your own relationship with money, and then the second part is talking about it. So there's some quite tangible tools here, like how to start a conversation, the topic that you might use, the way you might word something, acknowledging that sometimes people react. You know, you bring something up, you react, you have a fight. How can we break that down so giving people the tools to approach a topic in a different way, to acknowledge that your partner is reacting because they bring something to that, and really trying to help people to try different things, I guess, in terms of listening differently, having more awareness and more reflection about the conversation and why they sometimes lead to fights. So that's how it stands at the moment, and that is how it has been focus grouped.
Cool. So I'm going to now jump back to my slides. So that's a little look. So at the moment, and what we took to the focus groups and to our research participants was this website. And we said to them, look, this is very content heavy, but we need to just ask you whether this content is helpful. So the focus group results and kind of preliminary findings that I'll talk through with you today are very much around the usefulness of a toolkit and the toolkit that we've developed. Bearing in mind that there are a wealth of places where you can learn financial knowledge and financial literacy, become more financially capable as an individual, but there's far less places where you can work together as a team and sort of set these really positive partnership conversations in progress. And of course, a lot of what goes into a good, healthy money conversation is the same as any good communication with your partner.
And I think also it's worth noting, Ayesha's talked about how this is very much a preventative tool, and that was what we thought at the beginning. But as we've started talking to other people, we've had some feedback, particularly from an organisation down here in Christchurch where I'm based, who are working from a kaupapa Māori perspective, and they have got financial mentors and budgeting people on site alongside their family violence response, and they're part of the ISR response with the police and things. And they have said, actually, when we are working with couples who don't want to separate necessarily, and they want to, they've been right through the crisis and the intervention in family violence, and they're working towards a life free from violence, but together, we would show them this toolkit as something that they could take away. So after they've finished their intensive counselling with us, we would say, okay, so we would bring this up on screen and say, here's some tools. When you find yourself getting elevated because this discussion is really tricky, why don't you try this and this? So that was an area that maybe we hadn't thought of as much until they started saying that to us. So that'll be an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to sort of showcase kind of the tentative findings at the moment. There was a ton of sort of improvement pieces that I'm not going to, speak to today. There's a whole heap of, it would be really good if, the quizzes worked in this way and it was more interactive, and lots of ideas coming through about how this toolkit and this content could be delivered, particularly for different cultures. And Nicola will speak to that a little bit at the end, but there was, a whole bucket of sort of technicality, technical little improvements that we can make, and we'll speak about the next part of the project toward the end. But basically we took a mixed methods approach. So we had focus groups. So Nicola's teammate Beryl and I were present for the focus groups. We did, because of demand, have an online focus group, and I'll speak to that in a moment. Our focus group participants were then offered the opportunity to do a follow-up survey. So they walked away with access and ongoing access to the toolkit. Due to demand, they asked if they could share it with their wider friends and family, and we said, sure, go for it. And so in some cases, the survey went out to more people than were actually present for the focus groups, although the response rate was slightly lower, and I'll speak to that. And then finally, we were tracking our focus group participants' behavior, or sort of like, you know, where they were clicking and how they were navigating through the site with some website analytics as well. It's important to note that the survey and the website analytics were kept as anonymous as possible, although obviously having met our focus group participants, some of their survey responses and just some of the feedback they gave, you can, you know, sort of have an educated guess as to who they are, but we were kept it anonymous by design. We wanted people to feel free to give feedback you know, in whichever way they wanted to, and particularly negative feedback as well. It was really important to us that we got all those points to improve. So for the focus groups, we had over 50 people express interest in the study. So some of you may have seen Nicola and myself doing a bit of a media blitz when we were recruiting participants. So there was an article in the Herald, and Nicola was on RNZ, and I was on 7 Sharp talking about the project and how important it is that we all talk about money, but we do it in a constructive way. So we had 31 individuals attend a focus group. We had 10 couples. So, and 11 individuals. Many of those individuals weren't single, so they actually had partners, and some of that came through in the follow-up survey. They received a sort of nominal amount of koha via a shopping voucher, and they spent about 1 to 1.5 hours during that focus group navigating through the site and basically having a look at the toolkit. And then we came together as a group for around half an hour to just have a chat about how they found it and what we could improve going forward. So very much just testing out the toolkit, making sure that it was as inclusive as possible. We weren't, you know, we recognized that there were gaps in what we had developed, and we'll speak to that. But really just testing out that content and sort of getting ideas around what would help people use this. There are a couple of limitations. Of course, these are people who were predisposed to wanting to learn about this issue. And we did have some participants who said, I wish we'd had this 5 years ago. I wish I'd had this before I got divorced, you know. And so as we went through data collection, we really just, the messaging that we got from people was, can you please, there's a whole heap of things that we think can be better, but right now this information is needed. Can you please make this live on the internet? And we took that as a really positive thing, that we're on the right track. So I'm just going to put up a couple of quotes, and I'm just going to talk a little bit generally about some of the things that came along. Again, I'm not going to focus so much on the technical improvement parts of the website, but one of our participants, so he attended with his partner, and he was just very open and just said, I have made the comment in the past, I'm sorry, we can't have an adult conversation around money. As soon as we start talking about the money, suddenly the emotions come along. And he went on to basically say that he was really looking for a way with his partner. He didn't want to have a parent-child dynamic when it came to talking around money issues, but he felt as soon as the topic was raised that they both got their hackles up, and then of course conflict. So many of our participants had something similar to say in and around this issue. We did have and this came through in the survey results, we did have a bunch of people who, again, self-selecting into the focus group in the first place, who already had really constructive money relationships, but wanted to upskill, knew it was important, felt that they had something to offer the study, but also, you know, wanted to see whether there was anything that they were missing. And I found that really interesting. then we had some other participants who recognized that they had really unconstructive dynamics when it came to money conversations. And these tended to be our participants who really said, look, I need this yesterday. One man came to one of our focus groups. He's a father of a young, a preschool age child. His wife is from a different culture, and they were navigating that intercultural dynamic as well. And he came because he recognized that what he was doing was not constructive, and the way that he was acting and speaking to his wife about money was something that he was unhappy with and he was uncomfortable with. So the comments that he made were, I can't wait to go through that with my wife. He was just so thrilled to have something to help him do something in a more positive way. When we asked, what was it that really resonated with you? He said it was the way to facilitate the conversations. There's a lot of examples. The way that the site is set up with these examples is we go through the more negative, kind of bad examples, and then we say, well, this is a more positive way to have that same conversation. And he basically said, I do all the wrong stuff, and now I know how to change that. And so I'm going to adjust what I'm saying to those second examples. Was there anything else, Nicola, that I've missed?
No, I think there's so much validation for us in a comment like that. It's just, yeah, it's really exciting. That's what we are trying to achieve, is for people to just think about the way they talk to each other and start to build those skills for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, of course, about 3 to 4 weeks later, we did a follow-up survey. So there were only 21 complete responses that I'm going to speak to today, and I just want to show you a little bit of the demographic information so you can get a little bit of an idea. But again, very low numbers, so we're not talking representative at all. It was just what we were interested in with the online survey was saying, well, okay, so you came to the 2-hour focus group with us. We had a bicky and a cup of tea, and you walked away with a little bit of koha. But did you actually visit the site after you left? Did you actually have a money conversation? Was that money conversation better as a result of being exposed to the information in the toolkit? So we actually had a really lovely range of ages across our participants and across those 31 people, and that's shown for you on the slide. In terms of ethnicity, it was a real gift to actually be able to do the focus groups in the city centre, but also on North Campus and in South Campus. And even though the numbers were small, I'll get to that chat in a minute. Even though the numbers were small, it was sort of quite diverse groups. So there's sort of some ethnicity information. Obviously, one person is 5% of the sample. Again, not representative, but just to give you an idea that we did have a broad range of experiences, I suppose, in our group.
In terms of the chat, Ayesha, it's just the link to the toolkit being added. It's all good.
Oh, cool.
Not a question.
All good. So,
and I was just going to just jump in with you when you're talking about the Asian ethnicity. It's something that we are really conscious of, is the fact that the three of us who have, myself and Beryl, we come from quite a similar perspective. We are all Pākehā women. We are in heterosexual relationships. We're all similar age, I like to think, Ayesha. So we are really conscious of the fact that we are in this space, and we consider this a starting point. And it's now the onus is on us to expand and bring other people in with different perspectives. So very much just starting from what we know. And we're also conscious of the fact that a lot of the resources that we've drawn upon to develop the toolkit are based on quite a Western-centric, heterosexual relationship model. So yeah, like I say, a starting point, really conscious of it, and something for us to add and develop and build on.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the really interesting things, and I'll show you some statistics in a moment, and I am conscious of time, so I will speed up just a smidge to allow time for Q&A, was, you know, how would you characterize your money conversations prior to seeing the toolkit? So this particular person was already having constructive money conversations. And then did you have a money conversation after you saw the toolkit, and how would you characterize the quality of that conversation? And this person again chose constructive. And one of the qualitative answers they gave was that the toolkit really brought up some valid points about their relationship with each other and helped them address these. So this is someone who didn't necessarily have anything wrong with how they were talking to their partner or being spoken to about money. They felt that they had a constructive financial relationship, but that the toolkit really gave them extra things and the tools to discuss perhaps some of those more serious issues. So in terms of, did the toolkit encourage our participants to speak about money? We had an overwhelming yes. So, and it's worth noting here that for some of these questions, one of our older participants had a constructive relationship around money with his wife of, numerous decades. However, she is unwell at the moment. So a lot of his responses were around, it's just not a good time to be thinking about money right now while my wife is dealing with her health issue. He'd really come along and engaged in the work because he felt that it was so very important to have constructive money conversations. It was something that he thought that his wife and him had done particularly well, and he wanted to share that knowledge with us. Do you feel more confident discussing money with your partner and family? Was a little bit more mixed, but again, very much in our self-selected sample, yes, we do feel more confident. Now, the really interesting one here, and I'm just wondering, so I've got it on this slide. So the thing that I wanted to dig into with those yeses and those nos was, well, what's the context around these conversations? So what we found was that in terms of the improvement in those conversations, so going from an unconstructive disaster, unconstructive through neutral, constructive, and then really positive, we had 5 respondents say that their conversation was better. So 3 out of those 5, it was much better. So they went from maybe unconstructive disaster to constructive or similar. And then for 2 out of those 5, they just went up 1 notch. So it might have gone from neutral to constructive. The worst conversation, so we had one respondent who said we had, it went from constructive to unconstructive, had qualitative responses that suggested that this particular respondent hadn't shared the toolkit with their partner. So it was kind of a, I've got these tools, but hadn't felt comfortable sharing the toolkit necessarily, and had perhaps had attempted a much more serious money conversation. So in their qualitative responses, they'd they'd gone into a conversation wanting to tackle the debt that they were facing, but did answer yes, they did feel encouraged to have that conversation, and yes, they did feel more confident having seen the toolkit. So that suggested to us that perhaps this participant, had a negative experience for that first conversation, but is likely to try again. We had, of course, a whole range of people who had the same conversation before and after. And what was quite interesting about these were, again, those qualitative answers. So you can see it broken up on the slide there. So 2 were unconstructive before and unconstructive after. 6, well, 1 person went neutral, neutral. 5 had constructive through to constructive. And again, this is because the group of participants we had, many of them already had constructive money conversations. They really wanted to upskill, and some of them had excellent money financial relationships and they stayed excellent afterward. But again, the indication from the qualitative responses was quite positive in terms of how this made them feel more confident and comfortable about addressing money issues. So importantly, would people use this again? And so we had a lot of yeses and some maybes. So when we asked the maybes to elaborate, there were some reasons given. So there were a few participants who hadn't yet had another money conversation since having access to the toolkit. And one particular respondent said, I still feel that I'm the one that between myself and my partner brings up the boring topics. So she felt very much like it was a bit of a buzzkill, and she was looking for a way to take an unconstructive conversation about some of those boring finance topics and sort of being able to address those in a way that didn't make her feel like she was the one who always took the fun or the romance out of the relationship. And so that was that's kind of one innovative way I think we can improve the toolkit. Just how can we make it a little less dry? At the moment, it's a lot of words on a website with some interaction. Nicola, is there anything that you would add to that?
No, just reinforce that the next part for us is looking at how we can make it more fun and engaging and interesting, and that's one of the reasons. And in the previous one in your notes, Ayesha, you did just make the point that some people had cited busyness.
Yeah.
So in order to tackle people's busy lives, we want to make it much easier for people to navigate, so that if they do only have 5 minutes, they can get to what they need very, very quickly. Rather at the moment, there's a lot to work through before you can find what it is that you need. So that's the brief that we've given our partners.
Yeah, exactly. And then one of the encouraging things we felt, and this speaks to that idea of upskilling an already constructive relationship, but just making it even better. So a constructive before and after the toolkit conversations. You know, if I think of some areas that I feel we could improve on, then I'm going to refer to the toolkit. I know that it exists. And that's quite cool for us, I think, as researchers wanting to develop something and an intervention that people are going to actually use. So in terms of the website analytics, and this is anonymous, what we did note was that everyone, even though we told our participants that they could start wherever they wanted, almost everyone wanted to start at the first bit and move through in order. If they didn't start on page 1, then they were most likely to start on the relationship milestones page. So this is basically where we have a list of different changing circumstances. So getting married, buying a house, perhaps having children, planning for retirement, you know, these big life stage events that are perhaps triggers for wanting to have these conversations in the first place. The interaction seemed to be that users like interaction, so we're going to obviously do more of that. So they liked the checklists. There were some little quizzes to do, pictures to sort of hover your mouse over and it would flip and give you a little quote. Interestingly, 2 users visited sort of the page that outlines kind of the gendered dynamics, you know, around money, and only engaged with the content related to women. And so Nicola and I are just quite desperate to know whether these were women or whether this was, you know,
looking
these
to
were
work out
men
how to
looking.
read their partners.
Yeah, exactly. We just found it quite interesting that these people were quite targeted in how they used the site. We're not going to talk about hit rates or time usage or anything like that. As I said, participants were given an hour to an hour and a half. What we found was in our survey, we had most people that had been back on the site use the site between 1.5 hours in total since going to the focus group. We had a few people who had been on there for less than an hour and a couple of people who had used it for more than 2 hours since going to the focus group. And then finally, to wrap up, I suppose, and leave hardly any time for questions. So maybe start putting questions in the chat, or we'll unmute everyone. But if you write it in the chat, then we can respond via email to you.
There is a question in the chat, Ayesha, and it actually rolls. It's a lovely segue.
Nice.
So it says, could you use the video role plays for people to watch and identify issues? So absolutely, the audio-visual component is one of the things that we want to explore as we go into working out how we make it more accessible. So at the moment, the site is with a digital marketing agency who are specialists in user experience stuff, and that'll be one of the things that they consider, whether or not we can fit it into our budget, or whether we need to, you know, wait for a bit. But yeah, I think it's a really obvious one, role playing a conversation. And podcasting some of the information in bite-sized podcast chunks for people to listen to. And the other thing that there's quite a lot of work to be done to work out how it's going to be done, how we're going to navigate this. We have fantastic networks who are really interested, particularly with Good Shepherd, a lot of our work is in the financial space. So we have good relationships with banks and other people in the financial sector who are interested in how they might be able to interact with the toolkit. So for example, is there a space for when the banks are providing information about mortgages where they're directing, signposting people to our page about moving in together or buying a house together for some skills around that? So how do we leverage some of those relationships as best we can and spend our money as wisely as we can? So that's what we're working on at the moment. And as I said, you know, we are conscious of the fact that this is very much focused on heterosexual relationships, and we've got lots of work to do in that sort of space as well. But at the same time, we have had people from different backgrounds to our own have a look at it and say, yeah, there's things that you could add, but there's nothing in there that sort of undermines anything. We've tried really hard to acknowledge our assumptions, particularly in the heterosexual space, you know, and saying, we know that these are gendered issues for men and women, and how they play out in homosexual relationships will be different to heterosexual relationships and things like that. So yeah, still plenty of work to do in terms of extending and making it accessible. And I've just lost did your research discover that some of the pressures that stopped people from talking about money matters in their relationships?
Yes. So we're still going through some really rich kind of transcripts from relatively short focus group discussions. So we already knew from research some of these things. It does kind of all hinge on this idea that money is a taboo topic. And generally it's individuals' own emotional relationship with money that kind of prevents them from starting a conversation in the first place, or provides, you know, sort of ups the emotional conflict around those relationships. So what people tended to talk about was, you know, well, I'm a spender, but my partner is a saver, or vice versa. And those kind of mismatches and misunderstandings where someone was coming from, you know, were barriers for people. There's a whole cultural piece as well. Nicola, did you want to talk to that a little bit?
Look, like I said, it's just a matter of also we had some of our migrant communities, and particularly some of our Pacific communities of focus group participants say, when I'm having a conversation about money, I'm not just talking to him, I'm talking to him and his parents. So we know that there's that piece that needs to go on. We also know that there's, just to add on from the question, a reluctance for people who aren't the breadwinners or feel like they don't have the same income to start these conversations because they don't feel like they can. So they're sort of saying, well, I don't earn any money, so I don't have the right to bring this stuff up. So that's a real barrier as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's another question as well, Ayesha, that just says, could you invite people to use role plays, good community or school projects that would not cost much? I mean, in my head, I'm thinking that, we're going to corral some AUT students to be fabulous. I'm not sure, but yes, that's part of, I suppose, being working out the best use of our money is leveraging what we can leverage.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were some really wonderful ideas come through again about making the information more accessible. So, podcasting some of the information so that's available in an audio setting. One of our participants who was, I believe, a Samoan man said, can I do this? Can I take your material and do this as a workshop? I've got to do a talk at church next week, sort of thing. And so we think that there are just so many ways to take the content and sort of shape it in a very bespoke way in the future, to just basically get the messaging out to the people that want it, because we understand that not everyone is necessarily going to click on a link and then spend an hour looking through a website. Did anyone want to just very, very quickly unmute themselves and ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
Yep.
Hi, Ayesha. Hi, Nicola.
Hi.
I was typing your questions. In regards to the law, because economic harm as a result of economic harm in relationships, it's end up in violence. As you guys were talking about, that's where money problems in a relationship end up with. And violence from the legal point of view, it's unlawful. It's a crime. Does the legislator, or is your research going to put some pressure to the legislator to look at this is another way to resolve some of the violence, especially on those that have low socioeconomic in their society? If you guys get what I mean.
Oh, look, I was so excited when you introduced yourself and said you were a law student, and I thought, great, we're permeating the system from we're future-proofing. The legal issues are enormous. When I was working in a client-facing role at a family violence agency, I was just told the law, that was a few years ago now, I was just told, the law just hasn't been tested yet. It's been, the economic harm part has been added on to a family violence case where physical and psychological abuse has been part of it. But economic harm in and of itself is just, it's not even, we've got some work to do, and Ayesha's probably can talk more about how we might do that.
Yeah, so I think when I first started talking about this work, it was the lawyers, the family lawyers in particular, who got really excited. And I think, it's a very tough system. The financial abuse, economic harm piece of the family violence legislation hasn't been tested. And this is always my call to lawyers and judges and everyone working within the court system is there's proof. There's a money trail for this. You can prove this, but no, it hasn't been tested. And part of that is because of other barriers within the legal system and within the court system that prevent victim survivors from having the energy to pursue it the way that at the moment it needs to be pursued. So I am very conscious of time. So kia ora to anyone who needs to duck off to that next meeting. And Jane, do you want to wrap up?
Wow, that was just absolutely fabulous. There's so much there. I can't wait to read the and try it out. And send a link to my partner as well, of course. So thank you so much. That's just a wealth of information, and it raises so many important issues that in work addressing family violence, and your strength-based approach is really valuable. So a big contribution, and really look forward to following the toolkit over time. Very cool.
Sorry, I would love to just plant a quick seed just before we go. And that Ayesha and I are just planning our work for an Economic Harm Awareness Day at the end of November that we haven't spoken about publicly. But if you see anything that's us engaged, please, would be wonderful.
The CITR, we're happy to help advertise. That'd be great. So I'll just close with the same karakia before we go off on our journey for the day. So, and Nicola and Ayesha, just a big thank you. Tutawa mai ironga, tutawa mai iraro, tutawa mai iroto, tutawa mai waho, te atoai, te manitu, te moyora, ki te katoa. Omye, huye, taikie. I realized my microphone was on my head.
We heard you.
Yeah.